The Elite Prospects mid-season top 50 is already out. We'll be talking about that in detail in today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down Elite Prospects top 50 rankings with honorable mentions. So we're going to be talking in the first segment about the top 5 that we put out and in which order they are. I think that's the most kind of variable conversation from ranking to ranking when you watch around. In the second segment, we'll be talking about the highlights of the first round. So guys like Jackson Smith, Cameron Schmidt, Carter Bear, Victor Eklund, and a lot more of the highlights, the highlight conversations and debates we had for the first round. Then in the third segment, we'll do the same for the second round and honorable mentions. So guys like Haoxi Wang, who makes an appearance, Cullen Potter, some guys like that. So a lot of interesting conversations going on. Before we get to any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. As usual, if you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started here with our number one overall pick over at Elite Prospects. At number one, there was a debate, there was some arguments, and honestly, I think this will continue to be a talk throughout the year. But at the end of the day, we settled on James Hagens at number one. Talk me through why exactly that is.
Pure dynamism. He's probably the most raw skilled player in the entire draft class, and the game breaking ability he brings to the ice. He's been fantastic with Boston College so far this season. He's really picking up steam now that he's 15 games into his collegiate career, and the chemistry he has with guys like Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault is incredible. The transition offense is probably the gem of his offensive toolkit. Incredibly pacey, really middle driven. He's so elusive with the puck on his stick, and even though he is undersized at 5'10" and a half and 177, he's already really good at initiating small contact and getting to the middle of the ice. He doesn't get bullied away to the perimeter, and he's a dynamic threat. But as you mentioned, he's not a slam dunk at number one, and we definitely had a significant debate in that slot. And at number two, a player that had, as mentioned in the ranking article, just as strong a claim at the number one spot is Matthew Shaefer, who is definitely climbing up our board, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Schaefer's been phenomenal, and overall, he could really make a push for number one. I mean, we're talking about a phenomenal skater, a phenomenal defensive player as well, who understands how to create, loose pucks in the defensive zone, how to separate forwards, especially off the cycle, from the puck. Great net front presence, activates to the boards really well. But it's really the rush defense that stands out with Shaefer. Just he combines that skating and that range phenomenally well. And more he's getting comfortable jumping up in plays, activating up the ice, carrying the puck out of his zone. He made an absolutely beautiful assist to Malcolm Spence on the Erie Otters here. Another of his teammates that's going to be a first rounder. Just went end to end, kind of slipped the puck under an opponent's triangle, got around him, deked through another layer, and then made a pass cross slot to an open Malcolm Spence. Just a phenomenal goal, and I think he's solidifying himself as one of the best defensive prospects we've seen out of the draft in a couple years, for me at least, since the Dahlin Hughes conversation.
Absolutely.
He's been the best. He's better than Jiricek, better than Perek and Yakimchuk, better than Dickinson. I think it's pretty close when it comes to guys like Perek and Jiricek, but there's still a gap there for me, and he's been absolutely phenomenal so far. Moving on to number three, Michael Misa makes an appearance. Now, I made the case for him potentially as high as the first overall pick. Again, it's really tied up in that top range, and Misa's all about details. It's all about kind of connecting plays at a high-end level, combining his skills in ways that really, really work, reading the game incredibly well. He plays a center game. I don't know why people are still arguing about whether or not Misa is a center. He is a center. Everything he does is a center kind of – he plays a center game, makes center plays. he's a 1C projection in the NHL. I know there've been comparisons to Shane Wright and all that stuff. There's a gap between those two. And we'll keep it interactive, by the way, in this episode. If you have questions, leave them down below. We'll be really active in kind of answering your questions about these rankings, so feel absolutely free. And the full rankings will be in the description. So keep in mind on that, because we're not going to go through 50 players and 10 honorable mentions in this episode. It's impossible. But yeah, moving on from Misa, was really about details, but also some dynamism, also some skill. At number 4, talk me through our next prospect here and why he makes the cut at 4th overall.
Yeah, we have Porter Martone here at number 4, the first player in the ranking who we didn't fully debate at number 1 in this meeting, though the flashes of upside certainly extend up into that tier of 3 players in the top 3 that we have. But he's a tremendously skilled and physical, like power forward winger. The physicality often comes in explosive flashes rather than like sustained pressure. So he's a player that sometimes fades into the background physically, but then explodes with like a game misconduct or something. So there's definitely still some refining to do in the implication of his physicality, but it is there, and it is certainly NHL projectable with just how he's able to leverage his on-puck physicality to create space and time for himself. But wicked shot, extremely creative in terms of players that are willing to explore the reaches of their toolkits. Martone's probably the best in this draft class. He loves like just trying things out, seeing what he's able to pull off, and really just giving things a go rather than limiting himself to certain ideas. And that doesn't make him the most efficient player in this draft class, but it certainly makes him a player with high upside. And I mean, in terms of that opportunism offensively, the goal scoring skill, both on and off puck, there's so much to like here. And I mean, there's a reason that we've been giving like Corey Perry comparisons all season long already. This is a player with a really high upside that could be a franchise altering piece for whoever gets him. But there are a few more question marks for us than with the guys ahead of him on our board.
Yeah, absolutely. Those question marks mainly rely around pace and decision making. Those are kind of the two main issues. Kind of shoots from everywhere, tries everything. But there's a distinct lack of maturity in his game, I think, in his decision making and processing. We'll get to another prospect who's like that later on. But to round out the top 5, Roger McQueen ends up at 5th overall. By no fault of his own, he's just been injured for the longest time, and we've seen a bit more progression from the other 4 ahead of him. Martone's improved a bit. Misa's improved a ton. Matt Schaefer's really coming into his own since he came back from mono and has really kind of established himself. I think Schaefer's the one who improved the most. And James Hagens is another player who's finding his footing slowly but surely as the number 1 center in Boston College in the NCAA, which, in and of its own is already impressive. But for Roger McQueen, 6'5" center, really, really decent finesse skill as well. Heavy shot, really, really accurate release as well. Playmaking skills there, handling skill is absolutely there. And he's shown some defensive chops, some energy. He's a bit of he's really, really well-rounded in terms of his skill set. Still kind of figuring out what his niche is going to be, what's going to be the special element that gets him to a number 1 center position in the NHL. Because the size, as much as it's interesting and important, isn't going to be, you can't exclusively rely on that to be a number 1 center. So once he comes back from an injury, if we see some progression, and if we see that special element that really that cornerstone of his offensive game that he can rely on, maybe we're talking about a prospect who could push himself into the top 2 conversation. But so far, would you agree that Hagens, Shaefer, Misa is kind of a lock in the top 3 at this point?
For me, definitely. Like that has been my top 3 for over a month now. Like Porter Martone for me always has come with just a couple too many question marks to be quite in the midst of that conversation, though he's just on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would fully agree with that. I think that also like Roger McQueen is such a toolsy, manipulative player. There's so much upside with him, and I'm still a really big fan of what he brings. But
Yeah.
of course, as you mentioned, he's been out since October, and that those limits in viewing just play a big role in these early season boards when our sample size is limited to just 8 games of his season so far. But overall, I think that these 5 players in our top 5 certainly all bring top pairing upside, real game changing ability, and there weren't really any debates beyond these 5 players for these 5 slots. We think that there's a bit of a gap between McQueen and the rest of the pack here, even though he is injured at the moment.
Absolutely. So that's our top 5 talked about and discussed in detail. We'll now figure out what the highlights are in the first round here in our second segment. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your swings on American football with the NFL or European football with the Champions League, we're right in the midst of the group stage at the moment, or perhaps you're not a football fan in any capacity and prefer tennis or golf, or if you're listening to this podcast, just maybe hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever it may be, FanDuel has something to offer every kind of sports fan. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll highlight the first round kind of highlights here and the guys that we want to talk about in detail, mainly because, again, we're not going to go through 50 players and 10 honorable mentions on this episode. We're going to try to keep it as simple as we can. So in terms of the highlights here, we'll start off at number 6, where we have Jackson Smith, the 6'3" left shot defenseman from the Tri-City Americans in the WHL. He's been phenomenal this year, was really, really, really good at the CHL USA Prospects Challenge, played on that second pair behind Blake Fiddler and obviously Matthew Shaefer, and played really good hockey. Honestly, he's a lot closer to Matt Shaefer into that kind of top 5 range than people think. Mobile, really, really solid defensively, incredible rush defender. There's a lot to highlight in his game. But in summary, he's good enough to be in this range, and I don't think people are talking about him enough. He's a phenomenal, phenomenal defender, right?
He absolutely is. He's so physical. He's so solid defensively and brings such dynamism offensively, which is such a combination that you rarely find in defensemen, especially at this age. I mean, 17-year-old defenseman playing physical shutdown hockey. I mean, at the CHL USA showdown, he was the best shutdown defender for Team CHL, and it wasn't overly close. But he also brings that high-end handling and the vision in the offensive zone, the activations. There's so much to like with this player. Next, we have Victor Eklund, a player that was definitely also in that debate at number 6 with Jackson Smith. Such a high motor player, so much skill, so much pace and dynamism, constantly trying things out, testing defenses, prodding for holes, and a player that is playing some fantastic hockey at the Hockey Allsvenskan level with Jurgens this season. He's already one of their best offensive producers. He's constantly creating against pro competition, and he was doing the same thing last season as well, and he's only getting better with every passing week. He's a player that we see top line potential for, and this is kind of also what we're saying about this draft class, is that this top group of players is deeper than in typical draft years. The depth through the first round and the second round isn't the deepest, certainly, but this top end of the draft has a lot of depth and a lot of talent, and Victor Eklund in other draft years could be a candidate for 3rd overall, but this year he'll probably be more in that like 5 to 10 range and maybe falling to the lower end of that. But talk me through the next pairing of players that we were really hotly debating during our meeting. And that is Cameron Schmidt and Carter Bear. In the end, Cameron Schmidt ended up like edging out Carter Bear, and I did make an argument for that case as well during our meeting. But talk me through those two players and why they are top 10 picks as undersized WHL wingers.
Absolutely. So with Cameron Smith, it's just uber skilled, with probably the fastest skating in the entire draft class. Like he's like a bullet shot out of a gun when he's skating out there. He picks up speed incredibly quickly, gets up to that top speed quickly as well, and then maintains it throughout his shifts and plays at that speed as well. It's not like he's out skating his own brain. His brain's keeping up with that high end speed, and that is a dangerous combination. So yes, he's 5'7", but when you have a player who skates and thinks at such a high level, at such a fast pace, and who has the skill to make it. I mean, he's got a phenomenal shot, great playmaking, great handling. There's just so much to work with here with Schmidt that I think is going to overcome the lack of size there and make himself officially the first 5'7" prospect picked in the first round. Then we have Carter Bear at 9, right after him. That was a hot debate, along with Lyndon Lakovich, who went right after at 10. With Carter Bear, it's all about the details, the intensity. He's such a hard forechecker. He's so violent on the forecheck, and no one outworks him in this draft class. Like his work rate is ridiculous. And then Lakovich, you have a bit more of a finesse player, even though he's the bigger of the three. I think is the more finesse-oriented player. A lot more of a kind of play between the lines, find some soft space type of player. So in terms of why he ended up in this specific order, I think it's a lot to do with upside, while also factoring in projectability. With Schmidt, it's the raw upside. It's off the charts. Might be top 3 in the class. With Lakovich, the upside's there. The projectability is a bit less. He's not as physically competent, even though he's bigger than the other two. And then Carter Bear is just being a pest out there and being able to play such a versatile game. You can play any role for Everett and makes it work incredibly well. So that's why they ended up in that order. We also need to talk about Cameron Reid real quick, who was in our honorable mentions in the last rankings, in our top 32 at the start of the year. And now is at 11th overall in our rankings. It's mainly because of that projectability in his offensive game. We've seen a lot more kind of multifaceted hockey from him. He's not kind of your pure offensive defenseman anymore. His play at the CHL USA Challenge with Jackson Smith on that second pair, they were the best deep pair of either team, and made it work really, really, really well. So I've been really kind of enamored with what Cameron Reid brings to the game. Do you agree?
I fully agree, and he brings some really strong tools to the equation as well. He's a high-end skater, a high-end passer, highly intelligent player as well. He's constantly making just smart plays on both sides of the puck. He's constantly tilting the ice in Kitchener's favor in the OHL, and whether it be supporting off puck in the offensive zone, finding the small spaces, linking play between the two sides in the offensive zone, or defensively, the gap control, the ability to kill plays before even entering the defensive zone, leveraging his mobility to just smother things out against the rush is really, really impressive. And to be doing it as effectively in a shutdown capacity with Kitchener this season as a 5'11" 3/4 like defenseman, really impressive.
Yeah.
He's not overly big. He doesn't have that like physical play killing ability, but he is really reliable and definitely has some top 4 upside as a result of that.
Absolutely. Next conversation we need to have is Justin Carbonneau versus Caleb Desnoyers, who ended up back-to-back at 14 to 15 overall in our rankings, and not in the order people think. Justin Carbonneau has leapfrogged Caleb Desnoyers in our rankings. I kind of fought against that just mainly because Caleb Desnoyers is just so phenomenally smart and detailed, and he's going to be an NHLer. There's absolutely zero doubt about it. But Justin Carbonneau, it's really the upside and the projection with him, the raw skill that really pushes him above Carbonneau. He's a better skater. He pushes him above Desnoyers, rather. He's a phenomenal skater, better than Desnoyers in that range. Better shooter than Desnoyers. In terms of the passing flashes, the highs are higher with Carbonneau than they are with Desnoyers, and the handling skill is better. That kind of those 4 aspects of his game, Carbonneau is better than Desnoyers in those aspects. But for me, the gap in processing, the gap especially in maturity, is absolutely massive between the two. Carbonneau has a lot to learn in terms of when and how to try things. He tries everything, tries to do everything, that commands the puck on every shift, whereas Desnoyers is a lot more about working with his teammates, figuring out when and how to apply pressure, all that stuff. So that's the gap between the two. But at the end of the day, I understand the arguments for Carbonneau. The skill is off the charts, and that needs to be taken into consideration. There's 2 other prospects that we want to talk about here that are much lower than consensus in Anton Frondell and Ivan Ryabkin. Talk me through why that is for both these players.
For sure. So Anton Frondell is a really intelligent two-way center who is physically mature. He looks like a 23-year-old out there on the ice, especially when he's playing against junior competition, which he has been this season. He's only gotten into 7 Hockey Allsvenskan games with Djurgården. But he's defensively polished. He constantly drops low. Really good supporter in the defensive zone, and he's going to be an NHL player. The question here is upside. This is why he is at 17th overall on our board, rather than in that top 10 range where he is for so many scouts still at this point. So he has a wicked shot offensively. pretty decent passer and puck handler, and he's very physical as well. But there's a bit of a limitation in terms of creativity and dynamic skill with the puck on his stick. He's at his best off puck offensively and finding pockets of space and being a finisher in different sequences, which is why he's played fantastic hockey internationally alongside a player like Victor Eklund, who is that just dynamic puck carrier who creates those spaces that Frondell can find and plant himself in. So he's a player that we think is a bit perhaps more complementary offensively, but it has some real upside on the defensive side. And that's a projection that to us screams third line with some second line upside, which is why he still is in this top 20 conversation. But we don't really see that first line upside that other scouts do. For Ivan Ryabkin, it's a bit of a same story, but to a far greater degree. There's a lot of doubt for this player. Our Russian scout at Elite Prospects, Dylan Griffin, didn't even want him in the first round. So the fact that he did crack at 32 is basically because he has been a consensus first rounder for this entire time. But there was a lot of debate around this player. And for him, it's been a really low motor this season. He's been really struggling to make a difference at the MHL level with his skill, which has been really concerning. Definitely some character issues in quotation marks, where he's clearly he tried to force his way out of Dynamo Moscow to perhaps join the USHL, and he bailed on that to stay there, and then he got sent to the VHL, and now it's the MHL. He's been bouncing all over the place. So that has been a level of inconsistency with his deployment, and on top of that, the playmaking isn't game-breaking like it was in Flash's last season. The defensive work rate that flashed well last year has been abysmal this season. A lot of question marks, but still a player that if he bounces back could come back into that 20s conversation on our board. But from what we've seen so far this season, he has not looked like a first rounder, but we've kept him there due to his D-1 campaign.
For sure. Speaking of which, as of recording this, he's being scratched right now in the MHL, which is not
exactly.
It's not looking good for him. But yeah, that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment here, where we talk about the second round and honorable mentions highlights, guys like Haoxi Wang, Cullen Potter, and a lot more. But just before we get into that, just a quick word from our sponsors at PrizePicks.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your other favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can win up to 200 times your money on PrizePicks, and you can get $50 instantly if you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. This week on PrizePicks, I'm eyeing the hockey board, looking at Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal and Artemi Panarin for more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make your picks and have fun with your friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our second round and honorable mentions highlights for the Elite Prospects Top 50 rankings that just came out. Again, the link is in the description below. Feel free to check that out. Very, very interesting stuff from all of our team here. We worked really hard on that. We also have a rankings meeting video that's going to be out on YouTube, which we can also link below. So
it is already out, so we can indeed link that below right away.
Exactly. So we're going to be good on that end. So yeah, let's talk about the second round and honorable mentions highlights. Let's start off with Haoxi Wang, the 6'6" left shot defender who's been playing for the King Rebellion in the OJHL. Just signed with the Oshawa Generals. Will be playing approximately 10 games with them this season. Going to be moving up and down between the OJHL and the OHL until the King Rebellion finish their playoff run. Then he's free to go to Oshawa. So he's a very, very interesting prospect. 6'6", immensely strong skater for his size. Not just for his size, but overall, it's really, really good range and mobility as well. Great defensive stick. There's a lot to work with here. And basically, with Wang, it's all about projection. The tools are about average across the board, but there's room for growth in that range. I think also the playmaking and breakout vision are going to improve with time. So an interesting prospect to keep a look on his side, and he ends up at, what was it, 35? Yeah, 35 in our rankings. So yeah, keep an eye on that name. Remember the name. It's going to be a very interesting prospect, and it's almost definitely going to go in the first round if he continues to progress the way he has so far. Let's also talk about Cullen Potter, though, because we've seen him all over the place on boards. He's a 10th overall on Smart Scouting's board as well, and he's outside the first on ours. So what gives with Potter? What's preventing him from being a bona fide first rounder?
He's a bit of a divisive player. I think for many scouts, you either love him or you have a bunch of question marks when you watch him. I think I side a little bit more on the love side. I really enjoy watching this player. He's incredibly dynamic. He's a fantastic skater. The handling skill, the open ice play at the NCAA level is really impressive. He had a really hot start with Arizona State University this year, and he's kind of petered off a little bit since then in terms of offensive production. He was at a point a game earlier this year. He's now at half a point a game with 8 points through 16 games. But in terms of upside, I think that this is one of those players, one of the only players in this like B grade range that has significant top 6 upside still. It is still a bit theoretical. He still has to progress his decision making and his just breaking down of plays at his higher speeds a lot more to project in that type of role. But I think that the upside is there. And but the question marks are decision-making, high-end processing, and just vision of the ice in general. It is a bit inconsistent at this point, but he's an NCAA rookie. He could have played with the NTDP this season, and he isn't. The NTDP could certainly use a player as dynamic as he is this year, but he's a player that certainly caught our eyes in terms of those flashes of brilliance. But next we have a couple more USHLers here from my neck of the woods. So let's start off here with a pair of NTDP forwards with William Horcoff and William Belle. They're two big bodies that think the game well and are able to use their bodies very effectively on both sides of the puck. William Horcoff is probably the smarter of the two. He has a bit more soft skill than William Belle does. He's not the greatest skater in the world, but doesn't need to be because he has really long strides and he can catch up to play quite well. But there's flashes of passing upside, some really solid defensive sequences, and just the link-up play in transition, the high-paced passing, the 1-2 plays are something that have really caught my eye. So he's here at 46 on our board, and a player that I think could definitely be a bit of a riser because the tools are quite impressive. William Belle, for his part, is just an absolute tank. 6'4" right winger, right shot. He's already 220 pounds. He's at 48th on our board. He's incredibly physical. He uses that size to just barrel down the middle lane, crash his way to the net front. He's a fantastic net front presence in terms of getting redirections and screening goaltenders and winning inside positioning. There are few junior players that can compete with him physically. So he's a player that I definitely think has that third line power forward checking role, two-way impact kind of upside. He also has some really nice passing flashes. The shot isn't the biggest threat, but the combination of improving mobility and playmaking ability could also raise his upside a little bit. But talk me through the next player here, Hattie, as we have Kristian Epperson, a D+1 player in our top 50, the only D+1 player, and a line mate of Michael Misa's. What made him such a standout in our viewings?
It's the effort level and the maturity in this game. He plays a very, very detailed game, very energetic game. He's able to win battles on his own. I've seen him take on 1v4 board battles and go and come out of them with the puck. Very, very interesting prospect in that sense. I'm a big fan of his game. I think he brings exactly what Michael Misa needs on that line, and plays with him incredibly well. So when you have a player who's able to keep up mentally with a player as refined and polished in terms of his pace of play and his processing as Misa is, and who brings the physical elements, but also brings some soft skill in transition. He's able to kind of cut across defenders, use their hands against them, kind of push play the opposite way. Really good handler as well. The deking arsenal and creativity is definitely there. There's a lot to work with here with Epperson. He didn't have the best season last year, which kind of explained why he ended up being overlooked. But this year, 38 points in 28 games with the Saginaw Spirit. He's been playing phenomenal hockey. I am a big fan of Kristian Epperson, and I think he definitely deserves to be here. Lastly, let's talk quickly about Jacob Rombach before we close things off here. What's your take on this 6'6" defender?
Yeah, the Lincoln Stars have a real knack for developing this profile of massive right shot defensemen. They did it last year with Adam Kleber, who went in the second round to the Buffalo Sabres, and he had that combination of mobility, defensive physicality, and breakout ability, which is a triad of skills that Jacob Rombach has as well, and that's something that we really look for, a player that can shut things down defensively and then launch the attack the other way really fluidly. He has good scanning habits on retrievals, and there's definitely a lot to work with. He's still a project and he will take 4 to 5 years to develop into an NHL piece, but I really see a player here that at a bare minimum with decent development is a bottom pairing guy, but has that second pairing shutdown ability as well. He doesn't activate much offensively. There's a limitation of flash in his game, but he's a really solid defensive presence that I think will just continue to evolve and become a really decent shutdown minute muncher at the NHL level. But that wraps things up here for the midterm elite prospects board. We had so many players that we talked about. If you want to hear the actual debates and the conversations we had, again, it'll be linked in the description down below, so you can really take part in the meeting as it occurred. And of course, the ranking article for the entire list of players, as well as write-ups for every single one, justifying why we have them at their rank. It will also be linked below. But that wraps things up here for our show. Hattie, do you want to kick off the outro for us?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. Again, we'll keep this interactive. If you have questions about the rest of the rankings, about the guys we discussed, leave them down below. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, as usual, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And remember to check in with us every day as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of December. It's been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High. Happy holidays, and we hope you tune in next time.